There is something happening right now that you have not been told about. Not because it was kept from you deliberately, not because someone decided you weren't ready, but because the explanation you were given for how reality works stopped at the surface, and what lies beneath that surface is so different from what's on top that most people, when they first see it, assume it must be metaphor, it must be poetry, it must be the kind of thing people say when they want something to sound more profound than it is. It isn't metaphor. What you are about to encounter is the literal, measurable, experimentally confirmed structure of reality operating beneath everything you have ever seen, touched, thought, or believed. And within that structure, there is something that functions with precise, documented, reproducible specificity, like a message. Not a message in the way a fortune cookie is a message in the way that a radio signal is a message. Structured, directional, responsive to the receiver. You are the receiver, and the question this video is going to answer, layer by layer, is not whether the quantum field is communicating with you. The question is why you have been looking at the wrong layer of reality to see it. Let's start with what you think you know. You think you live in a world made of things, objects, matter, particles that collide and combine and form the structures you navigate every day. The chair beneath you, the screen in front of you, the body you inhabit. You were taught, somewhere between your first science class and your last conversation about how reality works, that these things are solid, that they are fixed, that they exist whether you look at them or not, and that your looking at them changes nothing about what they are. You were taught that the universe is a machine, fundamentally, and that you are one of its parts. A part that can observe the machine, perhaps even understand parts of it, but a part nonetheless. Separate from the whole, receiving inputs, generating outputs, moving through a world that was already there before you arrived and will continue after you leave. That is the surface. That is the layer most people spend their entire lives on. And it is not wrong exactly. The chair is real. The screen is real, the body is real. But what that surface layer conceals is so different from what it shows that calling the surface incomplete is like calling an iceberg wet. Technically accurate and almost entirely beside the point. Beneath the surface of every solid object, every fixed thing, every particle of matter you have ever encountered, physics found something it did not expect. Something it found so disturbing that one of the architects of modern physics, Richard Feynman, said publicly that anyone who claims to understand quantum mechanics does not understand quantum mechanics. Not because quantum mechanics is too complex to grasp, because what it reveals about the layer beneath matter is so different from what the surface suggests that the human mind, trained on surface reality, keeps trying to translate it back into surface terms. And every time it does, it loses the thing that makes quantum mechanics revolutionary. Here is what quantum mechanics actually found beneath the surface of matter. Before a quantum particle is measured, before it is observed, before any instrument or consciousness makes contact with it, it does not have a definite position. It does not have a definite momentum. It does not have a single, fixed, determined state. It exists instead as a wave function, a mathematical object that describes not where the particle is, but the probability of finding it in any given location if you were to look. The particle is not secretly somewhere specific, and we just don't know where. The mathematics is unambiguous on this point, and decades of experiments have confirmed it. The particle is genuinely, ontologically, not in one place. It is in a superposition of all the places it could be, weighted by probability, spread across space like a wave across water. This is not a measurement problem. This is not a technology limitation. This is the structure of reality beneath the surface you were shown. And then something happens that should have changed everything about how humanity understood its relationship to the world. You look. The moment an observation is made, the moment a measurement is taken, the wave function collapses. The spread of probability resolves into a single outcome. The particle, which was genuinely distributed across multiple possible states, becomes one thing in one place with one value. The act of observation does not reveal where the particle was. The act of observation participates in determining where the particle becomes. Let that land for a moment. The layer beneath solid matter is not more matter. The layer beneath the fixed world is not a more fixed world. The layer beneath the surface of what you see is a field of probability, of potential, of superposed possibility, and that field responds to observation. It responds to being seen. It collapses from infinite possibility into specific actuality at the moment of contact with a measuring system. Now, most people encounter this fact and immediately reach for the nearest surface interpretation. They say, well, that's just how subatomic particles work. It doesn't apply to the macroscopic world. It doesn't apply to chairs and screens and human lives. And they are right that the collapse of a single electron's wave function does not make your chair disappear when you leave the room. But they are wrong about what this means for the layer beneath your reality, because the chair is made of atoms, and the atoms are made of particles. And those particles, at the level where the physics actually operates, are not solid. They are not fixed. They are expressions of a field that is fundamentally probabilistic, fundamentally responsive, fundamentally structured around the relationship between what is possible and what is observed. The chair is the surface. The quantum field is what's beneath it. And here is where we need to go one layer deeper, because this is where the message becomes visible. If this is landing for you, here is something I want to offer before we go further.
Have you spent years trying every surface fix, therapy, mindset work, manifestation, habit redesign, and the same patterns keep coming back in different clothes? Every one of those tools is working on belief and behavior. The actual pattern was installed deeper than any of them can reach. Beneath the veil, a quantum map of reality's hidden layers walks through the full 5-layer descent, the surface reality you were handed, the layer where the pattern was actually installed, the physics underneath that, the ancient traditions that mapped the same thing thousands of years ago, and what you actually are at the bottom of all of it. This is the layer that therapy, mindset work, and manifestation could never reach. The longer you keep working the surface, the longer that deeper layer keeps generating the same life. So do this one tonight. It's waiting in the pinned comment below.
Now let's return to the layer we were descending into together. In 1964, a physicist named John Stuart Bell proposed a theorem. It was a mathematical argument about whether the correlations observed between quantum particles could be explained by any hidden local mechanism, any set of pre-existing properties the particles carried with them before measurement. Bell's theorem proved that if quantum mechanics was correct, no such hidden local mechanism could account for the correlations. The particles had to be genuinely entangled, genuinely connected across space in a way that had no classical explanation. The experiments that followed, particularly the landmark tests conducted by Alain Aspect in the early 1980s, and the even more rigorous loophole-free experiments of 2015, confirmed it. Quantum entanglement is real. Two particles, once entangled, remain correlated regardless of the distance between them. When you measure one and it collapses from superposition into a definite state, its partner instantaneously reflects that collapse, not after a delay, not through any signal traveling through space. Instantaneously, as if the space between them is not the barrier it appears to be on the surface. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance and spent years arguing it couldn't be real. The experiments proved it is real. The universe, at the layer beneath solid matter, is non-local. Separation is a surface phenomenon. Beneath the surface, things that have interacted remain connected in a way that transcends the geometry of space itself. If what you're encountering here is shifting something in you, go ahead and like this video and subscribe so we can keep going deeper together. Now let's keep going. Now we need to ask a question that the physics does not ask, but that the physics makes necessary. If the quantum field is non-local, if things that have interacted remain correlated across any distance, if the act of observation participates in collapsing possibility into actuality, then what is the relationship between the field and the observer, between the layer beneath matter and the awareness that makes contact with it? This is the layer most physicists stop before reaching. Not because the question is unscientific, because it is uncomfortable, because answering it honestly requires stepping off the surface of the materialist assumption, the assumption that consciousness is a product of matter rather than a participant in the field that matter emerges from. But the question has been asked, and the answers that have come back are not what the surface would predict. There is a phenomenon in quantum mechanics called the quantum Zeno effect. When a quantum system is observed repeatedly and rapidly, its evolution is slowed or even frozen. The act of sustained, focused observation prevents the system from changing state. The more attention is directed at a quantum system, the more it locks into a particular configuration. Attention, in the literal quantum mechanical sense, stabilizes reality. And there is the inverse, the quantum anti-Zeno effect, wherein frequent observation accelerates the system's evolution, allowing it to shift more rapidly through states. The frequency of observation modulates the behavior of the system being observed. This is not metaphor. This is documented physics. The relationship between observation and quantum state is not passive. It is participatory. And if the quantum field is the layer beneath all matter, beneath all experience, beneath the surface of everything you encounter, then the relationship between your awareness and the field is not the relationship between a passive receiver and a fixed signal. It is the relationship between an observer and a superposed system, between attention and possibility, between consciousness and the field that collapses into reality at the moment of contact. That is the layer beneath the surface explanation you were given, and it is where the message becomes visible. But there is a layer beneath even that, and to find it, we need to go somewhere older than quantum mechanics by several thousand years. The Vedic tradition of ancient India describes something they called Indra's net.
Imagine, they said, an infinite net stretching in all directions, and at every vertex of the net, a jewel. Each jewel reflects every other jewel, and in each reflection, every other jewel is reflected again, infinitely. The whole is present in every part contains the whole. No jewel is separate from any other. No node in the net is isolated from the field. This is not a metaphor for quantum entanglement. It is a description of the same structure, arrived at through direct contemplative investigation of the nature of consciousness, rather than through particle accelerators and photon detectors. The Vedic seers were mapping the same layer that Bell's theorem would later prove mathematically. The layer beneath the surface of separate, solid, isolated things. The layer where everything that has ever interacted remains connected. The layer where the net is whole at every point. The ancient Chinese concept of the Tao, as articulated in the Tao Te Ching attributed to Laozi, describes a field that precedes all things, that gives rise to all things, that all things return to, and that cannot be grasped by the conceptual mind, because the conceptual mind operates at the surface. The Tao is not a thing among things. It is the layer beneath things, the field from which particulars emerge and into which they dissolve. And critically, the Tao responds to alignment, not to force, not to grasping, to a particular quality of receptive attention that the text calls wu-wei, non-action, but which is better understood as action that arises from alignment with the field, rather than from the surface, will's attempt to impose itself on the field. The Hermetic tradition, which synthesized Egyptian, Greek, and early Jewish mystical thought into a coherent system somewhere around the 1st and 2nd centuries of the Common Era, articulated what it called the principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without, not as a poetic observation about the symmetry of things, but as a precise technical claim about the structure of reality. The layers of reality correspond to each other. The pattern that operates at the quantum level operates at the human level. The structure of the field beneath matter is the same structure that governs the relationship between consciousness and experience. The correspondence is not approximate. It is exact, because the surface and the depth are made of the same thing. And in the Kabbalistic tradition, the concept of Ein Sof, the infinite without end, describes a field of pure undifferentiated potential
from which the structure of reality emanates through a process of progressive contraction and specification. Ein Sof does not communicate through words. It communicates through the structure of what manifests, through the pattern of what collapses from potential into actuality, through the correspondence between what is held in awareness and what crystallizes into experience. The message is not encoded in language, it is encoded in the structure of manifestation itself. These traditions were not guessing. They were not projecting human desires onto a neutral universe. They were mapping a layer of reality that their methods of investigation, which were contemplative rather than instrumental, allowed them to access. And what they mapped, with remarkable consistency across cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, is the same layer that quantum mechanics found beneath the surface of matter. A non-local field, a responsive field, a field in which separation is surface appearance and connection is the deeper truth. A field that collapses from potential into actuality through a process that involves observation, attention, alignment. A field that, when you understand its structure, functions like a message. Not a message written in words, but a message written in the structure of what becomes real. Now let me show you something. Let me give you a story about a layer that was always there and a person who almost missed it. Her name was Mira. She was a cartographer. She mapped coastlines specifically, and she was extraordinarily good at it. She had spent 15 years traveling to remote shores, measuring the precise shape of the boundary between land and sea. Her maps were used by shipping companies, by governments, by scientists studying coastal erosion. They were accurate to within meters. She took enormous pride in this. One afternoon, she was mapping a coastline she had visited several times before. She had her instruments, her notebooks, her years of trained attention. She was measuring a particular stretch of rocky shore when something stopped her. She had been measuring the length of this coastline for 3 years, and every time she measured it, the number was different. Not by a little, by a significant amount, and not randomly. The more precisely she measured, the longer the coastline became. She thought at first that she was making errors. She checked her instruments. She recalibrated. She measured again. The coastline grew longer with each more precise measurement. What Mira had stumbled into, without knowing it, was something the mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot would later formalize as the coastline paradox. A coastline is not a line, it is a fractal. Its length depends entirely on the scale at which you measure it. Measure in kilometers and you get one number. Measure in meters and you get a larger number. Measure in centimeters and the number grows again, because at every scale, new irregularities appear, new bays within bays, new peninsulas within peninsulas. The detail is infinite. The coastline does not have a length. It has a depth of detail that exceeds any single measurement. Mira sat on the rocks and looked at the water for a long time, and she understood something that her training had not prepared her for. She had spent 15 years mapping the surface of the boundary between land and sea. She had been extraordinarily precise at the surface level, but the boundary itself had no surface. It had only depth, and every measurement she had ever made was not a description of the coastline. It was a description of the layer at which she had chosen to look. She had thought she was mapping reality. She had been mapping her resolution. And then she understood something else. The coastline had not been hiding from her. The depth had not been concealed. It had been there at every scale, at every moment she had ever stood on any shore. She had simply been trained to look at one layer and call it the whole. She went home and she changed the way she worked. She stopped trying to assign a single number to a coastline's length. She started mapping the relationship between scale and detail. She started describing not the surface of the boundary, but the structure of its depth. Her new maps were harder to read at first. They required a different kind of attention, but they were more true, not more accurate at the surface level, more true at the level of what the coastline actually was. And you, standing at the edge of what you have been calling your life, measuring it with the instruments you were given, finding numbers that shift every time you look more closely, you are mirror on the rocks. What you have been calling your reality is not wrong. It is a measurement at a particular scale. And the moment you understand that the depth is infinite, the moment you stop trying to find the single correct number and start attending to the structure of the depth itself, the field begins to reveal what it has always been showing you. At every scale, at every moment, hidden in plain sight behind the resolution you were using to look. What layer have you recently seen beneath the surface of your own life? A pattern that was always there until the moment you looked directly at it and it dissolved, or a truth that was hidden in plain sight until you were finally ready to see it. Share it in the comments. What you name there matters more than you think. There is a layer beneath that story, and it is the layer where the message actually lives. Let's talk about what the message is. Not what it says because it doesn't say anything in language, but what it is, what its structure is, what it means at the quantum field, the layer beneath all matter, the non-local responsive field that collapses from possibility into actuality through the process of observation, is communicating with you. The message is not a content, it is a structure, and the structure is this. Everything you have ever experienced, every event, every encounter, every synchronicity that stopped you in your tracks, every moment when the world seemed to arrange itself in a pattern that felt too precise to be random, every time you thought of someone and they called, every time you needed something and it appeared, every time a door closed and another opened, in a way that, if you trace the geometry of it, seems to have been designed. All of that is operating at the layer beneath the surface explanation you were given. The surface explanation is coincidence. The surface explanation is confirmation bias. The surface explanation is that you are a pattern-seeking animal in a random universe, and your mind is so good at finding patterns that it finds them where none exist. That is the surface. And there is a layer beneath it. The layer beneath it begins with a specific property of quantum systems that most people have never heard of, even though it is one of the most important features of the field. It is called quantum coherence, and it describes the ability of a quantum system to maintain the superposition of multiple states simultaneously, to hold all its possibilities in a correlated, structured relationship, rather than collapsing into a single definite state. Quantum coherence is fragile at the macroscopic level. Heat destroys it. Interaction with the environment destroys it. This is why your chair doesn't flicker between being a chair and not being a chair. The quantum coherence of its constituent particles has been disrupted by their constant interaction with the thermal environment. The system has decohered. It has collapsed to the surface. But here is what the research on biological systems has discovered in the last 2 decades. And this is the layer that changes everything. Quantum coherence is not just a laboratory phenomenon. It operates in biological systems. In the photosynthetic complexes of plants and bacteria, quantum coherence has been measured and confirmed to play a functional role in the extraordinary efficiency of energy transfer. The energy absorbed by a chlorophyll molecule does not travel through the photosynthetic complex by random diffusion. It travels through a quantum coherent process, exploring multiple pathways simultaneously, finding the most efficient route through what is effectively a quantum computation happening inside a living cell. At room temperature, in the warm, wet, noisy environment of a biological system that was supposed to destroy quantum coherence instantly. This was discovered. It was published. It was confirmed across multiple independent laboratories. And it means that life, at the layer beneath its biochemistry, is already operating in the quantum field. Not metaphorically, not as an analogy, as a literal quantum process. And the research on quantum effects in biology did not stop at photosynthesis. Evidence has emerged for quantum tunneling in enzyme catalysis, for quantum coherence in the avian magnetic compass, for quantum processes in the sense of smell. Life is not just made of matter that obeys quantum rules at the particle level. Life has evolved to exploit quantum coherence as a functional mechanism. Life has learned, over billions of years of evolution, to operate at the layer beneath the surface. And the brain, the organ through which your consciousness interfaces with the physical world, is a biological system of extraordinary complexity, operating in a warm, wet, noisy environment, full of structures whose quantum properties are only beginning to be investigated. The physicist Roger Penrose and the anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff have proposed, in their orchestrated objective reduction theory, that quantum computations in the microtubules of neurons may be involved in the generation of conscious experience. The theory remains controversial. It is not settled science. But the controversy is not about whether quantum effects operate in biological systems. That is confirmed. The controversy is about the specific mechanism by which they might contribute to consciousness. What is not controversial is this: you are a biological system. Biological systems exploit quantum coherence as a functional mechanism. Your brain is a biological system of exceptional quantum complexity, and the quantum field, the non-local, responsive, superposed field that underlies all matter, is not something you observe from the outside. It is the layer beneath you. You are not separate from it. You are an expression of it, an expression that has developed through billions of years of biological evolution and however many years of your own conscious development. The capacity to be aware of itself, to observe, to attend, to intend. And when you attend, when you direct your awareness with coherence, with focus, with the kind of sustained, structured observation that the quantum Zeno effect demonstrates, can literally stabilize a quantum system. You are not passively receiving a signal from a field that is separate from you. You are participating in the collapse of the field, from possibility into actuality. You are, at the layer beneath the surface explanation of your experience, a co-author of what becomes real. That is not a metaphor. That is the structure of the message. But there is still a layer beneath that. Because understanding the structure of the message is not the same as being able to read it. And to read it, you need to understand what it uses as its language. The quantum field does not communicate in words. It communicates in the language of resonance, in the language of pattern, in the language of what the physicist David Bohm called the implicate order. Bohm was one of the most important physicists of the 20th century. He was also one of the most philosophically courageous. He spent decades developing an interpretation of quantum mechanics that he called the implicate order, which he contrasted with the explicate order. The explicate order is the surface. It is the world of separate, solid, locatable things, the world your senses report to you. The world of chairs and screens and bodies and events that appear to be distinct and sequential and causally connected in the linear way that surface-level thinking assumes. The implicate order is the layer beneath. It is the enfolded order, the order that is folded into the field itself, the order from which the explicate order unfolds at every moment. In Bohm's framework, what we call particles, what we call objects, what we call events, are not fundamental. They are relatively stable patterns that temporarily unfold from the implicate order and then enfold back into it. The surface world is the unfolding, the quantum field is the enfolding, and the structure of what unfolds is determined by the structure of what is enfolded. This is the layer where the message lives. Not in the explicate order, not in the sequence of events as they appear on the surface, in the implicate order, in the pattern that is enfolded in the field, and that unfolds into your experience as the specific sequence of events, encounters, synchronicities, and openings that constitute your life. And Bohm went further. He proposed that consciousness and matter are not fundamentally different, that they are both expressions of the same implicate order, that mind and world are not separate things with a causal relationship between them. They are two aspects of a single enfolded reality. The message is not sent from the field to you. The message is the structure of the enfolded order expressing itself through both the field and your consciousness simultaneously. You are not receiving a transmission from outside. You are the transmission, becoming aware of its own structure. Bohm used a specific image to illustrate this that is worth sitting with for a moment. He described a hologram. In a hologram, the entire image is encoded in every part of the holographic plate. Cut the plate in half, and each half still contains the whole image at lower resolution. Cut it into quarters, and each quarter still contains the whole. The information is not distributed across the surface. It is enfolded into every region of the medium. The whole is in every part. Bohm proposed that the universe has this holographic structure at the level of the implicate order, that every region of space enfolds information about the whole, that the separation you observe at the surface, the fact that this particle is here and that particle is there, is a feature of the explicate unfolding, not of the enfolded depth. At the depth, the whole is present everywhere. Every point in the field contains the pattern of the whole field. And because you are a biological system embedded in that field, a node in that net, a jewel in Indra's infinite lattice, you do not have partial access to the message. You have access to the whole message, enfolded in the very structure of what you are. The reason you have not been reading it is not that you lack access. It is that you have been looking at the surface of the hologram and trying to find the image in the surface pattern, in the interference fringes, in the seemingly random distribution of light and dark. The image is not in the surface pattern. The image is in the depth structure. It requires a coherent light source, a specific quality of illumination to become visible. And that coherent light source is the quality of attention you bring to your own experience. This is where Bohm's physics and the ancient contemplative traditions converge with a precision that is not coincidental. The Vedantic concept of Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, describes a mode of awareness that is the ground of all three. It is not a state you enter and leave. It is the substrate that all states arise within. It is the coherent light source that makes the holographic image visible. It is the quality of attention that illuminates the implicate order within the explicate surface. And the Sufi concept of kashf, direct unveiling, describes the moment when the membrane between the surface and the depth becomes transparent, not through intellectual effort, not through accumulation of doctrine, through a specific quality of receptive presence in which the heart, which the Sufi tradition treats as an organ of perception rather than merely an organ of emotion, becomes coherent enough to read the pattern that the field is continuously expressing. These are not different descriptions of the same comforting abstraction. They are different technical maps of the same specific perceptual mechanism. The mechanism by which the implicate order becomes legible to a consciousness that has developed sufficient coherence to receive it. Now we need to ask the question that the surface version of this idea almost always avoids, because the surface version wants the message to be simple. It wants the message to be, you are loved, everything is unfolding perfectly, trust the process. And there is a layer of truth in that, but it is the surface layer of the truth. And there is something beneath it that is more demanding and more transformative. The implicate order is not organized around your comfort. It is not a cosmic reassurance system. It is the structure of what is trying to unfold. And what is trying to unfold is not always what the surface version of you has requested. Here is the layer beneath the comforting version of this idea, and it is the layer that actually changes lives when you encounter it directly. The quantum field's message is not addressed to the part of you that is navigating the surface. It is addressed to the whole depth of what you are. And the whole depth of what you are includes everything you have been avoiding at the surface. Every pattern you have been circling around, rather than entering. Every layer of your experience that you have been trying to collapse prematurely into a comfortable resolution, rather than allowing to remain in superposition long enough for its actual structure to become visible. The message is often delivered through exactly the events you have been trying to prevent. The relationship that ended, the career that collapsed, the plan that failed with a precision that felt personal. These are not the field withholding something from you. These are the implicate order correcting the trajectory, unfolding what is actually enfolded, rather than what the surface version of you was trying to force into being. The Tao Te Ching describes this as the valley spirit, the lowest place, the place that everything flows toward, the place that, because it does not assert itself, because it does not try to impose a particular shape on what arrives, receives everything. The valley is not passive in the sense of being inert. It is passive in the sense of being perfectly receptive. And its receptivity is what makes it the place where the water gathers, where the life concentrates, where the depth accumulates. The message is asking you to be the valley, not the mountain, which asserts its shape against the sky, which is visible and imposing and impressive at the surface level. The valley, which receives, which holds, which allows the depth to accumulate without trying to control what form the accumulation takes. This is the layer that is hardest to enter. Because the surface mind experiences receptivity as passivity, it experiences non-grasping as giving up. It experiences the maintenance of superposition, the refusal to collapse the wave function prematurely, as uncertainty, as failure to decide, as weakness. But the quantum field's structure says something different. It says that premature collapse is what cuts you off from the full range of possibility. It says that the coherent maintenance of superposition is not passivity. It is the most sophisticated operation the system can perform. It is the operation that keeps all the pathways open until the most fitting one becomes clear. And there is a specific, documentable difference between the quality of outcomes that emerge from premature collapse and the quality of outcomes that emerge from coherent superposition maintained until the natural collapse point. The outcomes from premature collapse are technically functional but locally optimal. They are the best available solution given the constraints of the surface level you were operating at. The outcomes from coherent superposition maintained until natural collapse are globally optimal. They are the best available solution given the full depth of the field. They are the solutions that, in retrospect, you could not have engineered from the surface. They are the solutions that arrived as if from outside the system, as if the field itself contributed something that the surface level analysis could not have generated. These are what you have been calling the moments when everything came together, when the right person appeared at the right moment, when the solution arrived from an unexpected direction, when the loss turned out to be the opening. These are not lucky accidents. They are the implicate order unfolding when you held the space for it to unfold into. They are the message, delivered in the only language the depth knows, the language of what becomes real when you stop trying to force a particular shape onto the possible. Now let's go to the layer where this becomes experiential. Because everything up to this point has been a map. And a map, however accurate, is not the territory. The territory is what you are about to enter. There is a practice, and it is not a meditation in the sense of sitting quietly and trying to calm your mind. It is a perceptual shift, a change in the layer from which you are observing your own experience. And it begins with something you are doing right now. You are listening or reading. Your awareness is directed outward, toward content, toward information, toward the surface of what is being said. This is how most of us navigate most of the time. Awareness directed at the surface, receiving the explicate order, processing events as they unfold. This is not wrong. It is necessary for navigating the surface world. But it is only one mode of attention, and it is the mode that makes the message invisible. There is another mode. It is not mystical. It is not difficult. It is simply a shift in where you place the background of your attention while the foreground continues to operate. Try this. Without stopping what you are doing, without closing your eyes, without withdrawing your attention from these words, let a small portion of your awareness drop beneath the content of what you are receiving. Not to analyze it, not to interpret it, just to notice the field of awareness itself within which the content is arising. Notice that before this word appeared in your experience, there was a space, and after this word, there is a space, and the space is not empty. It is the ground from which the words arise and into which they dissolve. It is the implicate order expressing itself as your awareness. It is the layer beneath the surface of your attention. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to sustain it for any particular length of time. Just notice it. Notice that it is there. Notice that it has always been there, beneath every thought, beneath every experience, beneath every moment of your life, as the ground from which the surface arises. That noticing is not a spiritual achievement. It is a perceptual shift, and it is the shift that makes the message readable. Because when you are operating entirely at the surface of your attention, the quantum field's communication arrives as coincidence, as random event, as the noise of a universe that doesn't care about you. But when you have even a small portion of your awareness resting in the layer beneath, when you are simultaneously engaging the surface and attending to the depth, the pattern becomes visible. The structure of what is unfolding begins to reveal the structure of what is enfolded. The coincidences stop looking random and start looking like the fractal coastline, like a depth of detail that was always there at every scale, waiting for you to look at the right resolution. This is not wishful thinking. This is not the confirmation bias that the surface explanation invokes to dismiss the phenomenon. Confirmation bias explains why you might misinterpret a random event as meaningful. It does not explain the phenomenon that researchers studying synchronicity, the term Carl Jung coined for the meaningful coincidence, have documented across thousands of cases. The phenomenon of events that are causally connected, that share a structure of meaning without sharing a causal chain. Events that the surface explanation cannot account for, but that the implicate order predicts. Jung spent decades investigating synchronicity. He was not a physicist, but he collaborated with the physicist Wolfgang Pauli, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, in an attempt to understand the relationship between the acausal connecting principle he was observing in his clinical work and the acausal non-locality that quantum mechanics had discovered in the structure of matter. Their collaboration, documented in the book The Interpretation of Nature and the Psyche, published in 1952, was one of the most serious attempts in the 20th century to bridge the layer between physics and psychology, between the quantum field and the field of consciousness, between the message and the receiver. Jung's clinical evidence was extensive.
He documented cases of synchronistic events with a precision that his critics could not easily dismiss. A patient describing a dream about a golden scarab while, at that precise moment, a golden scarab beetle flew against the window of his consulting room. A patient's depression lifting at the exact moment her mother, in a different city, died, the death being unknown to the patient until hours later. A series of fish-related events occurring around a patient who was working on a psychological complex related to a particular symbolic theme. These were not random anecdotes. They were systematically collected, carefully documented, and theoretically analyzed by one of the most rigorous minds in the history of psychology. And Jung's conclusion was not that the universe is magical in a comforting, uncritical sense. His conclusion was that there is a layer of reality beneath the surface of causally connected events, where meaning is the organizing principle, where what happens is structured not by prior causes alone, but by the pattern of meaning that the moment is expressing, where the implicate order, to use Bohm's later language, enfolds a structure that unfolds simultaneously as external event and internal experience, where the message and the receiver are expressions of the same field. That is the layer beneath the surface explanation of synchronicity.
And it is the layer where you have been living, unknowingly, your entire life. Think about the moments in your life that stopped you, the ones that felt too precise to be random, the phone call that came at the exact moment you were thinking about the person, the book that fell open to the exact passage you needed, the stranger who said the exact thing that answered the question you had been carrying for weeks, the door that closed, the loss that felt like a catastrophe, that turned out to be the precise event that redirected you towards something that could not have been reached any other way. The surface explanation says these are coincidences. The surface explanation says you are pattern seeking in noise. But the surface explanation does not account for the structure of these events, for the fact that they tend to cluster around periods of transition, around moments of genuine openness, around times when the surface of your life is being dismantled and the layer beneath is becoming visible. The surface explanation does not account for the fact that people who develop the capacity to attend to the deeper layer report not just more synchronicities but more coherent synchronicities, more structured, more clearly relevant, more precisely fitted to what they are actually navigating, as if the field responds to the quality of attention directed at it, as if the quantum Zeno effect has a macroscopic analog, as if the coherence of your observation modulates the coherence of what unfolds. This is the layer beneath the surface explanation of your experience. and it is the layer the message is written in. Has there been a synchronicity in your life so precisely structured that the surface explanation simply couldn't hold it? Something you always sensed was beneath the surface of what was happening, but couldn't articulate until much later. Leave it in the comments. These moments are data points from the deeper layer, and they deserve to be named. Let me give you another story. A shorter one this time, but one that goes to the core. His name was Elias. He was an astronomer. He spent his nights looking at stars, measuring their light, calculating their distances, mapping the structure of the universe at the largest scales. He was a man who believed, deeply and sincerely, that the universe was indifferent, that it was vast and cold and did not know he was there. He found this belief not depressing, but clarifying. He liked the precision of it. He liked knowing exactly where he stood in relation to the universe. Small, temporary, irrelevant to the cosmos. It was, he felt, an honest position. One night, he was observing a particular star, a red giant, near the end of its life, and he noticed something in the data that he could not immediately explain. The light curve of the star was showing a pattern, not a random variation, a structured variation, a pattern that repeated with a regularity that suggested something orbiting the star, something he had not expected to find there. He spent weeks analyzing the data. He ran every test he could think of to rule out instrumental error, atmospheric interference, data processing artifacts. The pattern remained. It was real. And in the process of investigating this pattern, of directing his full, sustained, rigorous attention at this light curve, something happened to Elias that he did not have a scientific category for. He began to notice that his attention itself had a quality, that when he was looking at the data with exhaustion and frustration, he saw one thing. When he was looking with fresh eyes, with what he could only describe as a kind of receptive openness, he saw something else. Not different data. The same data, but with a different quality of attention. A different layer of the pattern became visible. He mentioned this to a colleague, half jokingly, and his colleague said, "You've just discovered what every great scientist eventually discovers. The instrument is never separate from the observation. You are part of the measurement." Elias went home and sat in the dark for a long time. He had spent his career believing that the universe was indifferent to his presence. And now he was confronted with the possibility that this belief was itself a surface, that beneath the indifference he had been projecting onto the cosmos was a structure that was not indifferent at all, not caring in the human sense, not personal in the way a relationship is personal, but responsive, structured, organized around a relationship between the observer and the observed that his belief in indifference had made invisible. He did not become mystical. He did not abandon science, but he changed the layer from which he was doing science. He started attending to the quality of his attention as a variable in his research. He started noticing when his most significant discoveries came, and he found, without exception, that they came during periods of what he could only call coherent receptivity, periods when the surface of his assumptions was quiet enough that the deeper pattern in the data could become visible. He published his findings about the star. He did not publish his findings about attention, but he carried them for the rest of his life as the most important thing he had ever learned. That the universe had been sending him a message for decades, and he had been looking at the wrong layer to see it. You are not Elias, but you have been doing what Elias did. You have been looking at the surface of your experience and drawing conclusions about the nature of the field that generates it. And the field has been showing you, at every moment, at every scale, in every synchronicity, and every closed door, and every unexpected opening, the structure of what is enfolded in it, the structure of what is trying to unfold through you. The message is not, everything will be fine. The message is not, you are special, and the universe loves you in a sentimental way. The message is more precise than that and more demanding than that. The message is, you are a node in the net. You are a point of observation in a non-local field. The coherence of your attention modulates the coherence of what unfolds. The layer you are observing from determines the layer of reality that becomes visible to you. And there is always a layer beneath the one you are currently looking at. Now let's talk about what it means to actually receive this message. Not to understand it intellectually because you have been doing that for the last hour, but to receive it, to let it land at the layer beneath your conceptual processing. Because here is the thing about the quantum field's communication. It is not designed for the conceptual mind. The conceptual mind operates at the surface. It takes the continuous flow of experience and cuts it into pieces. It labels the pieces. It arranges the labeled pieces into causal sequences. It builds narratives. It explains. And all of that is necessary and valuable and genuinely useful for navigating the surface world, but the message is not in the pieces. It is in the field that the pieces arise from. It is in the implicate order that enfolds the structure of what unfolds. And the conceptual mind, by its very nature, by the way it processes experience, is looking at the explicate order. It is looking at the unfolded surface. It is measuring the coastline at one scale and calling it the whole. To receive the message, you need the mode of attention that the contemplative traditions have been describing for thousands of years, and that the quantum field structure makes physically comprehensible. The mode of attention that holds the surface and the depth simultaneously, that engages the explicate order while remaining rooted in awareness of the implicate order, that thinks without losing contact with the field from which thought arises. The Zen tradition calls this ordinary mind, not the mind that is trying to achieve something, not the mind that is grasping for insight, the mind that is simply present at every layer without collapsing into any single layer. The mind that is, in the language of quantum mechanics, in a coherent superposition of multiple modes of attention simultaneously. The Sufi tradition calls it the heart's perception, the faculty that perceives the unity beneath the multiplicity, the implicate order beneath the explicate surface, the message beneath the noise, not through rational analysis, but through a mode of knowing that is prior to the division between knower and known. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition describes Rigpa, the recognition of the nature of mind, as the awareness that is aware of itself, not awareness directed at an object. Awareness recognizing its own nature as the ground from which all objects arise. This is not a trance state. It is not a withdrawal from the world. It is the most awake, the most present, the most fully engaged mode of being. It is awareness operating at the layer beneath the surface of its own content. And in each of these traditions, this mode of attention is described as the mode in which reality communicates most clearly, in which the message is most legible, in which the synchronicities are most coherent, the openings most visible, the structure of the implicate order most clearly readable in the pattern of the explicate events. This is not because the field communicates more when you are in this state. It is because you are finally listening at the right layer. Here is the practice that brings this from concept to experience. And it is specific to what this video is about. Not a generic meditation. A specific perceptual exercise for reading the layer beneath the surface of your current life. Think of something that is unresolved in your life right now. Not the biggest thing, not the most charged thing. Something that has a quality of being stuck. Something you have been trying to figure out at the surface level and haven't been able to resolve. You have been analyzing it, turning it over, looking at it from different angles, measuring the coastline, and the answer hasn't come. Now, instead of looking at the situation, look at your looking. Notice the quality of attention you have been bringing to this situation. Has it been anxious, contracted, grasping? Has your attention been trying to force the situation to resolve into a particular shape? Has the quality of your observation been, in quantum terms, high frequency and disruptive, collapsing the wave function before it has a chance to explore the full range of its possibilities? Now try something different, without trying to solve the situation, without trying to figure it out. Simply hold it in a different quality of attention, the way you would hold something fragile and precious, the way you would look at a night sky, not trying to count the stars, just letting the whole field of it be present in your awareness. Let the situation exist in superposition. Let it be unresolved, without that unresolvedness being a problem. Let all the possible ways it could unfold remain simultaneously present in your awareness without collapsing into the one you are most afraid of or the one you are most desperate for. This is not passive. This is not giving up. This is the most active thing you can do with a quantum system. You are maintaining coherence. You are preventing premature collapse. You are creating the conditions in which the implicate order can unfold the most fitting resolution rather than the one your surface level anxiety is trying to force. And then, from that quality of attention, notice what arises. Not what you think, what arises. What appears at the edge of your awareness without being summoned. What the field offers when you stop trying to extract a specific answer from it and start listening at the layer where the answer already exists in enfolded form. This is how you read the message, not by demanding it speak in your language, by learning to listen at the layer where it is already speaking. There is something specific that happens in the body when this shift occurs. It is worth naming because the body is not separate from the field. It is the field's most immediate instrument, and it registers the shift before the conceptual mind does. When you are operating at the surface, grasping for resolution, forcing the wave function toward a preferred outcome, there is a specific quality of contraction. It lives somewhere between the sternum and the throat, a tightening, a narrowing, a quality of the field of your awareness being compressed into a smaller and smaller cone of possibility. This is what premature collapse feels like from the inside. The range of what you can perceive narrows. The message, which arrives at the periphery of attention, in the soft edges of experience rather than the hard center, becomes inaudible. And when you make the shift, when you allow the situation to remain in superposition, when you drop the grasping and let the quality of your attention open, something releases in that same region. Not dramatically, not like a revelation, more like a pressure equalization, like the moment when you stop fighting a current and let it carry you. The field of your awareness expands, the periphery softens and widens, and the message, which was always there at the edges, begins to be audible again. This is not a metaphor for relaxation. This is a specific change in the quality of your observation, and it has specific consequences for what the field can unfold into the space your attention creates. The quantum Zeno effect demonstrates that observation frequency modulates quantum evolution. What you are doing when you release the grasping and open the attention is changing the frequency of your observation from the rapid, anxious, collapsing frequency that freezes the system in the state you fear, to the coherent, receptive frequency that allows the system to evolve toward its natural resolution. You are not doing less. You are doing the most sophisticated thing a quantum observer can do. You are creating the conditions for the field to express what is enfolded in it, rather than what your anxiety is projecting onto it. The quantum field has been sending you this message your entire life, not intermittently, continuously, at every moment, in the structure of every event that has unfolded, in the pattern of every door that opened and every door that closed, in the geometry of every synchronicity that stopped you, in the precise timing of every encounter that changed the direction of your life. You were not receiving it because you were looking at the surface. You were measuring the coastline at one scale and calling it the whole. You were looking at the explicate order and missing the implicate order that was generating it. You were watching the wave and missing the field. But there is something important to say here, something that the surface version of this idea almost always gets wrong. And getting it wrong is the difference between this being genuinely transformative and being just another comfortable story you tell yourself about the universe. The message is not always comfortable. The quantum field is not a cosmic customer service system designed to give you what you want. The implicate order is not organized around your preferences. The message that the field sends is not always the message you were hoping to receive. Sometimes the message is, this path is closed. Sometimes the message is, the thing you are holding onto is preventing you from moving to the next layer. Sometimes the message is, the loss you are experiencing is the precise event that is necessary for what wants to unfold, to be able to unfold. Sometimes the message is delivered through pain, through disruption, through the dismantling of the surface of your life in ways that feel like destruction, but are, at the layer beneath, reorganization. The Tao Te Ching says, "The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao." The message that fits neatly into your existing framework is not the message from the deepest layer. The real message from the implicate order is always, in some respect, asking you to release your grip on the surface, to let the wave function of your life remain in superposition a little longer, to trust the depth rather than grasping for the surface resolution. This is why the message is so often missed, not because it is hidden, because it is uncomfortable, because reading it requires a quality of attention that the surface-level mind finds threatening, because the implicate order's communication is not organized around the ego's preferences. It is organized around what is trying to unfold, and what is trying to unfold is always larger than what the surface version of you has planned. There is a layer beneath that discomfort too, and it is the most important layer of all. The reason the message asks you to release the surface is not because the surface is bad, not because your preferences are wrong, not because the ego is the enemy. The reason is simpler and more radical than any of those. The surface is the thinnest layer of what you are, and the message is addressed to all of you, not just the part that navigates the surface world. All of you, the whole depth, the non-local, entangled quantum coherent biological system that you are, embedded in a non-local, entangled quantum coherent field, participating in the continuous collapse of possibility into actuality through the specific quality of awareness that is, at this moment, reading these words. The message is addressed to that, to the whole depth of what you are. And to receive it fully, you have to be present at that depth, not just at the surface. This is what the ancient traditions were pointing at when they described enlightenment, liberation, awakening, gnosis. Not a state of permanent bliss, not an escape from the surface world, a mode of being in which the surface and the depth are simultaneously present in awareness, in which you can navigate the explicate order with full competence while remaining rooted in the implicate order, in which the message is continuously legible because you are continuously listening at the layer where it is spoken. This is available to you, not as a distant achievement, not as the result of decades of practice, though practice deepens it, as a recognition, as the perceptual shift that happens the moment you stop looking only at the surface and let your awareness rest in the depth that has always been there beneath it. The quantum field is not sending you a message because you are special in a way that others are not. It is sending you a message because you are a node in the net, because you are a point of observation in a non-local field, because you are, at the layer beneath your surface identity, an expression of the implicate order becoming aware of itself. And every node in the net receives the transmission. The only question is which layer you are listening from. Let's bring all of this together, because we have traveled through several layers in this transmission, and it is worth naming what has been revealed at each one. At the surface, you were given a story about a mechanical universe of separate solid things, and a self that is one of those things, receiving inputs and generating outputs in a world that is indifferent to its presence. Beneath that surface, quantum mechanics found something that should have changed everything. A field of probability rather than fixed matter. A wave function that exists in superposition until observed. A non-local entanglement that makes separation a surface phenomenon and connection the deeper truth. A measurement problem that places the observer inside the system rather than outside it. Beneath the quantum mechanics, the ancient traditions had already mapped the same layer. Indra's net, the Tao, the implicate order, Ein Sof, the principle of correspondence, different languages for the same topology, different maps of the same hidden territory. Beneath the ancient maps, the specific mechanism by which the field communicates. Quantum coherence in biological systems, the quantum Zeno effect, the implicate order unfolding as synchronicity, the structure of meaning organizing events that are acausally connected, the message written not in language, but in the pattern of what becomes real. And at the core, beneath all of it, the recognition that you are not separate from the field, that you are not a receiver of a transmission from outside, that you are the field becoming aware of itself, that the message and the receiver are the same thing, seen from different layers, that the veil between you and the quantum field is not a barrier. It is the membrane of your own awareness, and it dissolves the moment you look at the right layer. This is what you came here for, not the surface explanation, the depth beneath it. And now that you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. The layer has been lifted, the map has been given to you. What you do with it is the next layer of the transmission. There is a community of people who have been on this journey. People who have felt what you felt when you first sensed that the surface wasn't the whole story. People who have had the synchronicities, the moments of impossible precision, the encounters that could not be explained by the surface explanation. People who are learning to listen at the layer where the message is spoken. If you have had a moment in your life that you could not explain at the surface level, a synchronicity that stopped you, a coincidence that was too structured to be random, a moment when the field seemed to be communicating something so directly that you couldn't dismiss it, share it. Not because sharing it proves anything, but because when you name it, when you bring it from the implicate order into the explicate order, when you give language to the depth, you make it more real at the surface. You make the message more legible for yourself and for everyone else who is learning to read it. And if this transmission reached you at a layer beneath the surface, if something in what has been said today landed not just in your thinking, but in the depth beneath your thinking, then what you do next matters. Not in the sense of following a program, in the sense of continuing to look at the layer beneath whatever you are looking at. In the sense of bringing the quality of attention to your life that makes the message legible. In the sense of trusting what you find at the depth more than what you find at the surface. Because the surface is what you were given. The depth is what you are. If there is someone in your life who has always sensed there was more beneath the surface of things, but hasn't yet had the language or the map for it, consider sending them this video. When you share it, you are not just passing along content. You are giving someone access to a layer they could sense, but couldn't quite reach alone. That act of sharing creates something between two consciousness fields that neither could generate separately. It lifts the veil for both of you. One more thing before we close this layer of the transmission. The title of this video says the quantum field is sending you a secret message. And by now you understand that the word secret is not quite right. The message is not secret. It has never been hidden. It has been in plain sight, at every moment, at every layer of your experience, waiting for you to look at the right resolution, waiting for you to stop measuring the coastline at the surface scale and start attending to the infinite depth of detail that was always there. The message is not secret. The message is the structure of reality itself, communicating through the pattern of what unfolds, through the geometry of synchronicity, through the precise timing of every opening and every closing, through the fractal depth of every moment of your life. What was secret was the layer from which to read it. And that layer is no longer hidden from you. You have been a surface dweller in a universe with infinite depth. And today, you looked beneath the surface. Not for the first time, perhaps, but with more clarity, with more precision, with a map that names the specific mechanisms by which the depth communicates with the surface, with a practice that shifts your attention from the explicate order to the implicate order and back, holding both simultaneously. The field has been sending you this message your entire life. Every synchronicity, every impossible timing, every moment when the world arranged itself into a pattern too precise to be random, every door that closed and every door that opened, every loss that was a reorganization, every disruption that was a redirection. Every moment of your life has been the implicate order unfolding into the explicate order, showing you the structure of what is enfolded, communicating in the only language the depth knows, the language of pattern, of resonance, of meaning that transcends causality and speaks directly to the layer of you that is not separate from the field. You are a node in Indra's net. Every jewel reflects every other jewel. Every point of observation in the non-local field contains the whole field. The message was never sent from somewhere else. It was always already enfolded in what you are. And now you can read it. The veil is thinner than you think. It always was, and now you can see through it. What you find beneath this layer is the next layer, and the next layer is already waiting. It has always been waiting. It was waiting before you arrived, and it will be there after this transmission ends, and it is available to you at every moment, in every experience, in every ordinary instant of your life that contains, if you look at the right resolution, the infinite depth of what is actually there. Welcome to what was always beneath everything.